If you enjoy sculpting with clay, you'll appreciate a similar type of modeling technique in Max known as paint deformation. This video will show you how it works. The Paint Deform command allows you to interactively sculpt on a 3D surface by pushing and pulling an object's skin using your mouse. To show you some of the sculpting options, we'll be using a file named Paint Deform, which can be found in the Working Files folder. Let's go ahead and start by selecting the object and pressing F4 on our keyboard, the shortcut for shade with edged faces, so we can inspect our geometry. As you can see, we've added quite a bit of additional detail into our surface. And that's going to be important due to the way that we'll be manipulating our skin. Now keep that in mind on the surfaces that you build. This technique does require a little heavier geometry. When modeling, you usually try to think as light as possible when originally setting up your surfaces. In our situation here though, in prepping for the Paint Deform tool, a high line count is pretty much necessary. The paint deformation isn't an actual modeling command. It's instead simply a feature that you'll find when working on an object that's been put into an editable poly state. Now, if that terminology is unfamiliar to you, be sure to specifically check out the chapter on working at the subobject level a little later on in this title. Really, the only thing you need to know at this point is that the paint deformation is not found with all the other Max modeling commands. It instead shows up when you have an edit poly modifier applied or when you've converted your object down to an editable poly. I'll show you both techniques here. Let's go ahead and turn off our edged faces with F4, then we'll apply the Edit Poly modifier. Take your mouse back to the right-hand column and put it in a blank area. The idea is we want to turn the cursor into a white hand. When you've got that, go ahead and right-click. This will bring a list up of all the different sections that you'll find in the command panel, the ones that are currently visible and the ones that are deeper down below. Drop down to the list where you see Paint Deformation and click. The command is activated by clicking directly on the Push-Pull button. Pull your cursor over to the object and take note of the light blue circle. This represents your brush. The size of the brush and the strength at which you'll deform the surface are both determined over in the Modify column. Back on the right, change the Push-Pull value from 10 to 20. The higher the value, the more aggressively you'll be reshaping the surface, so this will give us a little bit stronger of a pull. For the brush size, let's set that to 150. Using a substantially larger brush is meant to affect a larger area. Verifying that the Push-Pull button is still down, go ahead now and paint on your surface. To push the surface further out, simply paint or click over the same area again. In just moments, we've now created ourselves a mountain range for a quickly made terrain. To affect things to a lesser degree, you can simply lower the values. I'll take the Push-Pull value to 5 and the size of my brush to 60. This will give me the opportunity of sculpting in some subtle, smaller changes in my elevation. Pushing the surface in can be accomplished by using a negative strength value. We'll keep the brush size at 60, but lower our push-pull value to -5. Painting now, I can create a riverbed running through the mountains. Now that pushing in can also be accomplished by using a positive strength value and simply holding down the Alt key when you paint. We'll change the push-pull value back to 5 and increase the size of our brush to 100. This will give me the opportunity of pushing down the cliffs a little bit as they get closer to the river line. I'll put the brush back on the surface and hold down the Alt key when I paint. You can probably imagine the paint deformation controls coming in especially handy when working on modeling a character, doing anything from the small work like adding veins and muscle bulges, to the larger tasks like maybe sculpting the details onto a face. Let's see if we can't do that. Cancel the Push-Pull command, then right-click on the surface, choosing Hide Selection. Let's unhide the grid by typing G, then type Z on the keyboard to recenter our view. With us now in better position, let's go back to the Create Geometry column and simply draw a sphere in the middle of the view. Once done, I'll type Z again to center that object. If you then want to zoom in a little bit by rolling your mouse, go ahead and do so. Now, we mentioned the importance of having a lot of detail in the surfaces that you're going to sculpt on. Let's type F4 for shaded edges. Then, over in the Modify column, let's change the number of segments on our sphere to 200. We'll type F4 to now hide the lines, then to hide our selection brackets around our sphere, we'll type J. At this point, our grid is pretty much just getting in the way. Let's hide that again too. Okay, where in which we use the Edit Poly modifier on our ground terrain, this time with the object selected, we'll simply right-click, converting down to an editable poly. This just gives us an opportunity to show you the other way of getting to the commands. Let's go back on the right-hand side, cursor turning into a hand, then right-click. Again, we'll go down to Paint Deformation. Once you're there, turn the Push-Pull button back on. As far as our push-pull value, let's change that down to 5, and we'll leave our brush size set at 20. Okay, now the idea here is to see if we can't accurately sculpt a character's face. Let's start with the eyebrows. I'll simply draw 2 side-by-side rainbows toward the top of the sphere. I'll paint over it twice to double up on the strength. Let's now turn to the side and we'll paint in a couple ears. You can do that pretty easy by simply drawing out a question mark. Let's go back to the front of our face and we'll see if we can't add in a nose. Now for that, we'll leave our push-pull value at 5, but we'll want to increase the size of our brush from 20 to 50. For the nose, simply position your cursor directly below the eyebrows in the center and click a couple times. To add in a set of cheeks, let's click once on both sides of the nose. For the mouth for our character, back on the right, we'll leave the push-pull value setting at 5, but we'll decrease the size of our brush from 50 down to 25. Now the mouth is going to want to be pushed in as opposed to pulled out, so make sure to hold down the Alt key as you paint. Under the nose I go, giving this guy a smile. Let's now style in some hair. We'll leave the values as they are on the right-hand side, and we'll start on the top of his head. I'm simply going to hold down and pull straight up 2 or 3 times there. I'll come to the side. Kind of looks like an arrow as I'm going here. Then I can finish it up. I'll simply click a couple times on the side. Each time I'm clicking, creating kind of a clump of hair. Around the back I go. Nothing special. Just kind of designing this is the way I think it would look best. And we can come back around. Let's also give him a little goatee down near his chin. Simply click in the same place a couple times. And there we go for that. And I got a little place that's kind of pushed out, so I'll hold the Alt key in and kind of brush over that area a couple times both ways. You know, with that mess I've made, it's probably better off just to undo. So we'll Control Z and we'll clean that out. There we go. Very easy to go back in and do it again. This time being a little more careful as I draw. Oops, there we go, undo. It really pays to get yourself in position as you begin working. There we go. What do you think? So that's the paint deformation tools that come with the Edit Poly. Anytime you now have a need to interactively sculpt in your scene, you've got the command to do it. I'll save this out as Paint Deform Completed in case you want to look it over.